Desperation is an emotion we've all felt at one time or another, a feeling of hopelessness, of not knowing exactly what to do or how to get ourselves out of a mess. But sometimes desperation can lead us down a path with no way back, a path with no second chances and only pain and heartache left behind. This is one of those stories, a story filled with a brutal murder of a young woman taken advantage of by two people looking to satisfy their own depraved desires, a couple bound together by love and haunting past, an evil love. The story of Margaret Sanchez and Terry Speaks. Before we begin, Margaret is a part of another story we've talked about on here before. She was a friend of Zach Bowen and Addie Hall, who was another couple who sadly met a horrific end to their romance. She was featured on a documentary talking about them and mentioned she suffered nightmares and couldn't seem to forget what had happened to her friends. However, a few years later, she found herself in a situation hauntingly echoing her friend's tragic end. If you want to know more about Zach and Addie, please listen to their episodes in my playlist. While not much is known about Margaret or Terry in their lives before, a few things are known. He was an ex-Marine, formerly married, and somewhere along the way his marriage dissolved, and sadly, like Zach, his wife left and took the children along with her. Some stories say Terry began drinking and attempted suicide a few times after she did. He was lonely and met Margaret, who was a free-spirited young woman. She was wild, fun, adventurous, and the two found a spark between them. She pulled him from his depression, and for a while the couple was happy and lived together in a home in Kenner. It's unknown, however, if Margaret knew Terry's past and knew that the former Marine was hiding a shady past history. In 2003, he was convicted in North Carolina for having sex with a 14-year-old girl, and in the following years, he violated his probation and failed to register as a sex offender not once, but twice, which was a requirement. He was also convicted of assault and domestic violence, according to some sources, in 2009. The couple were working at a strip in the French Quarter called Stilettos. Terry was a doorman and a barker, who, for those that are curious, it's someone that stands outside and tries to get people to come in and sit down and enjoy a drink or two. Margaret was a dancer known by Margot stars or Nola stars, according to some. She was an odd choice, as many have said that she wore long skirts paired with a top hat and other strange clothing choices, seeking attention on herself. It was in 2009 Jaron Lockhart would start working as a dancer here and meet the couple for the first time. The three worked together there for a bit, and for a while everything seemed normal. Jaron Lockhart was born February 28th of 1989 in Independence, Louisiana. She was a fun, outgoing, and friendly girl who struggled with her addiction. At the time of her death, she was in talks with her family to go to a rehab clinic. However, the day after talking to her father about it, she vanished. She had stopped dancing for a few years before, returning to the stage once her boyfriend had lost his job. She had a daughter who at the time of Jaron's death was living with grandparents. Many said Jaron struggled with a heroin addiction, and a later report from the police found opioids in her system. When her body was found, she was a young woman that had struggled with a hard life, or on that fateful night of June 5th, 2012, it was the last time Jaron would be seen alive. Margaret and Terry entered Temptations, and the three spoke for a bit. The couple was looking for a stripper to party with and possibly engage in a threesome with, luring in with a false promise of money. Video surveillance from the club showed Jaron and a couple leaving together at 2 a.m. It wouldn't be until later that they were positively identified as Margaret Sanchez and Terry Speaks. Two other businesses in the French Quarter would record the three on their security system after leaving Temptations. 23 minutes later, after leaving together, a license plate recognition system camera in Kenner picked up Margaret's car. Authorities believe that the home Margaret and Terry shared in Kenner was where the murder took place. 22 hours after Jaron walked out of Temptations with the couple, a license plate camera on Interstate 10 picked up Margaret's car crossing into Mississippi. An hour and a half later, her car was picked up re-entering Louisiana on I-10. Police have said they suspect that when Jaron's body parts were discarded on the Gulf of Mexico, 22 hours after Jaron walked out of Temptations with the couple, a license plate camera on Interstate 10 picked up Margaret's car crossing into Mississippi. An hour and a half later, her car was picked up re-entering Louisiana on I-10. Police have said that they suspect that's when Jaron's body parts were discarded into the Gulf of Mexico. Over the next few days, Jaron's severed body parts washed up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast from Bay St. Louis to Long Beach. Her arms, legs, torso, and finally her head. Her limbs were cut to the joints, and the flesh had been cut and peeled away, trying to hide her tattoos. She had been stabbed once in the back, but the single wound had been fatal. Some have said Margaret and Terry had books on black magic and the occult in their home, and somehow Jaron had become a sacrifice, but only the couple knew the actual of what took place that horrible night and why they did it. Jaron was one of 5 missing women, and thanks to her piercings, the police had a name and a face to the victim. It was a routine traffic stop that police pulled Terry and Margaret over, and Terry fled from the vehicle, and a foot pursuit engaged police, where they were able to tackle him and arrest him for failure to register as a sex offender in the state of Louisiana. Once video surveillance witnesses and the license plate reader evidence was used to piece Jaron's brutal murder together, Terry was convicted June 20th, 2015. Terry was convicted June 20th, 2015 of second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. He is serving 2 life sentences at the Louisiana State Penitentiary, one for murder and one for being a quadruple felon offender. Shortly after Terry's initial arrest, Margaret was arrested and held 1 year and 1 day after Terry was sentenced. Margaret stood trial. She received a sentencing of 40 years for manslaughter, 40 years for obstructing justice, and 20 years for the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice. The couple's story as of this show hasn't had much updating to it. They took advantage of a young woman desperate and in need of help and discarded her like a piece of trash. But she was more than that. She was a friend, a daughter, and a mother. Many have had theories about how Margaret could do such a thing after losing a friend the same way. Did she go crazy? Did it give her a sense of power? No one knows for sure. The answer is something that only she knows. Thank you all so much for listening. If you have any recommendations, please feel free to comment or contact me. I'm on all social media, and they are all linked on the page. Please feel free to leave a like and rate the review if you like. I'd love to hear from all you guys as well as your thoughts on the case. Please be respectful to the parties involved, and until next time, take care.